very first day at Origin Systems. But before you go in there, can I just have a minute to talk to you? Look, I know what you're thinking. You're scared. You have no idea really what you're doing here. You don't really think you belong in this industry. I mean, your previous work experience is public health and the travel industry and cattle ranching and purebred dogs. You're pretty sure you don't belong here at all. But I want you to remember, your background is also Dungeons and Dragons. You've been running your own D&D game for, 10 years now, with homebrew rules? You even submitted a module or two to TSR. Hate to break it to you, they're not going to get published. But that does mean you've been thinking about games and game structures for a while now. In fact, I think you innately know more about games and game players than you believe you do. So don't ever think you don't belong here, because you absolutely do, I promise. You don't know it yet, but the minute you walk through those doors, your entire life is going to change. You're about to embark on a career like nothing you've ever seen before. So before you do, I'd like to give you a little advice that I think might help you on this journey. The first thing I'm going to tell you is, for God's sakes, lose the skirt, the hose, and the heels. I know you had to wear them at your last job, and I know you want to make a good impression on your first day, but I promise you, you're never going to have to wear them ever again. So Origin Systems is not going to be like any company you've ever worked for before. You're going to play laser tag in the hallways. There's going to be a company-sponsored lunch every other Friday. Make sure you get there early because the Oreos disappear really quick. At some point, you're going to tape your manager to your office door, and you're going to watch the wing commander team from downstairs tie balloons to a G.I. Joe and launch him off the second-floor balcony. But the best part is, you're going to work with some of the most brilliantly talented, incredibly creative people you ever have. And I gotta say, from my viewpoint, 33 years in your future, I still think that there was more talent concentrated in that one office building than in any place since. Oh, and that cute guy in the beat-up leather jacket, the one working on the strike commander team downstairs, yeah, you're going to get to know him a lot better. And I mean a whole lot better. Happy anniversary. He's here. So at Origin, you're going to finally find your peers. People who they tell the same jokes, we've watched the same movies, and we play the same games. Spoiler alert, in 33 years, D&D will be so mainstream that actors will be sitting on primetime couches and talk shows talking about their latest D&D game. No, I'm not kidding. For real. Anyway, you're going to find yourself in a company with people who feel like family, but they aren't. And that's important to remember, because in just a few years from now, game companies are going to start using that phrase, "We're a family here." And they're going to use that to try to entice new people to come to work for them. So here's advice number 1. If a company says, "We're a family," it's a huge red flag. Let me explain why. So, in moral and political philosophy, and has been for quite a long time, just got dark, that's fine, there's a long-standing concept called social contracts. Now, a social contract, it's an agreement, either implicit or explicit, that lays out how people behave within specific social arrangements. It's something that all the parties agree to and understand when they become involved with others in that particular situation. And the social contract is different depending upon the situation that you're entering. So therefore, a familial social contract is different from a business social contract. So this is what a family social contract could look like. All the understood rules are in relation to supporting, defending, and maintaining a family and its individual members over a long period of time. It's kind of an all for one and one for all kind of agreement. The point of it is to build and sustain that family. Now, a business social contract may look something like this. Here, all the understood rules, they're kind of in relationship to business continuity and keeping the business running, keeping it making a profit. You might notice that the only mention of individuals in the business social contract pertains to the benefit of the business, how the individual benefits the business, or the laws that they have to follow as they pertain to the individuals. Now understand, there's nothing wrong with a business social contract. It should be in place. We should all understand how we relate to each other in a business situation. It has to be there. Businesses need to make money so they can pay their employees and give their employees the benefits they need and even give back to the communities in which they exist. Where it becomes a bad thing is when there is confusion on which contract is being enforced. So, when a business calls itself a family, it's invoking this familial social contract. This causes the employees who come in under this idea to want to follow that sort of type of rules. However, even though the HR department may have used those words when they put that ad out there, the business is not and bluntly cannot adhere to a familial social contract. They just can't. It's not the way they work. But this disconnect, this kind of mixed message that we're getting out, this is what can cause confusion and it can cause chaos in these relationships. In the worst case, the business, consciously or not, can take advantage of this and exploit that familial commitment to take advantage of their employees. And the classic example works like this. A company exec comes down to the team and says, "You are our company's only hope. If we don't ship this product that you're working on, we're going to have to close the company down. It's really all up to you. We need you to do everything you can to help us save the company." And of course, that includes crunch time and all the sacrifices and all the things that go on with that. So when a company says that, they're counting on the employees believing in that familial contract, the part that says, we will defend and support every individual member of this family. That's our job. When in reality, the company has no intention or even capability of providing that same kind of support back for the individuals. So I think you can kind of see the conflict here. Unfortunately, Sheri, you're going to find yourself on the wrong end of this arrangement several times. And because of that, due to some of these conflicts, you're going to find yourself in situations where you're seeing things happen around you and your gut tells you this is not going to end well. What I need you to do when that happens is I need you to believe it, to trust your gut, and find the courage to act. Whether that means moving off that team, shifting to a different department, or even leaving the company altogether. I need you to learn to trust yourself, Sheri. And honestly, it's going to be a lot healthier for you in the long run. But learning to trust your gut when you think you see that writing on the wall is one of the hardest things to learn. And honestly, Sheri, you're not very good at it. In fact, when you think you see the writing on the wall, you will choose to ignore it. So I'm going to give you some of the warning signs. And I want you to watch for these because these are definitely writing on the wall. Number one, when the person who hired you or your direct supervisor is laid off or leaves suddenly. Of course, this is if they are competent people and haven't committed any kind of serious offense of which you are aware. This kind of behavior in a company indicates that there's going to be some sort of a change or has been a change. And when they lay off your boss, it's likely because your boss no longer fits the direction of that change. Or maybe your boss doesn't feel like that there's a place for them in that change, or they don't believe in that particular change. Problem is, if it doesn't include your boss, probably doesn't include you either, because you were hired under that boss and then for the reason that they believed that they needed you for that product. Now, your boss may encourage you to stay. But again, I need you to trust your gut on this, because you're going to have this happen to you 3 times, and it's never going to end well. When you're seeing or hearing things within the company that doesn't quite match what the executives or your boss is saying, Remember we were just talking about that whole business social contract, familial social contract? Yeah. Remember, the business social contract, everything is aimed at preserving the continuity of business for that business, keeping it profitable, keeping it moving forward. So this can cause higher-ups and people above you to really toe the party line and to tell you everything is going well when it's really not. And maybe they personally don't want to admit that things are going bad because they're just as invested in this as you are. Or maybe they aren't permitted to talk about things that are going bad. But in any case, it's not going to go well. And you need to start watching. You start to see this happen around you. You need to start to watch because this is handwriting on the wall. Now, it is completely possible for a company to go through some really rough times and to have to really change direction and for them to come out okay. That's entirely possible. However, one of the really important facets to a company making a big change is that they keep communications open and that people continue to talk, that you have regular, honest, open communication. So, if you start to notice your boss attending a lot of closed-door meetings or comes out of the meetings really closed-lipped, it's handwriting. Start to watch for it. When there are drastic changes in your work environment, not for the better. Now, this one may seem pretty obvious, but trust me, Sheri, you need to hear this one. Watch your surroundings. When the actual physical infrastructure begins to change, when execs start looking at different office space, hardware goes without being repaired, office equipment and office furniture starts getting auctioned off around you, yeah, when that happens, that's handwriting. And it's a major warning sign. And I know, asking you to trust your gut may very well mean asking you to leave your job. And even with the handwriting right there on the wall, you will try to stick around anyway. Even as the furniture you are working on is being auctioned off around you. Seriously. But you know what? I can't really blame you for that. After all, for most of your career, game jobs will be hard to come by, particularly for women. And a new job may require you to move to a different state, and then only to have to move again in a couple of years. So I get it. It's scary. It's hard. And even though you see the handwriting, maybe the project is really great. Maybe it has a really dream license like Star Wars. And you think that's going to make up for the fact that there's writing on the wall. But it won't. So here's what I really need you to understand. The game job you leave does not have to be your last game job. I know. You think you're never going to find another job, ever. I know that there are nights you're going to cry about how there's just no hope, and you'll never get to make another game, and you'll never do it again. And I know that instead of trusting your gut and leaving when you should, you're going to hunker down and deal with whatever awful stuff is dished out just to try to stay there. But I'm going to tell you right now, that never works. But there's good news, and I really want you to hang on to this, Sheri. You're a game designer. When you're between game jobs, you're still a game designer. You're just an out-of-work game designer. And you will always be a game designer, even if for the moment you're working for an insurance company or selling garage doors or putting together corporate websites. So you see, there's a trap that a lot of people fall into when thinking about their career. Everyone, including yourself, hopes that this is how their career will go. You get hired at the perfect game company, working on the exact game you want to work on. You get a promotion. You get to be a designer on a AAA game. You get another promotion. You get to be lead on a AAA game. You get a big promotion. You get to make your dream game games forever. It doesn't work that way. Now, sure, there might be some incredibly rare, incredibly lucky individual, but it just never goes this way. Instead, too often, it goes like this. Not like that. Go back, Sheri. It goes like this. You get hired at a company. You work really hard. The job ends. It may not be at all your fault. the company folds, the project shifts, your boss leaves, and then the whole team is let go. It may not be your fault at all. At this point, you then come home, you get up, you send out a resume, or 2, or 100, and you don't find another game, not another game job. So you leave, and you never look back. And you know what, Sheri? You're going to have a number of friends and a number of coworkers that you're going to lose to this, where they just walked away. But it doesn't have to be that way. I promise. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to give you a quick glance into the future and show you what your career path is actually going to look like. This is what your career is going to look like. Those green dots, those are game companies that you work for. Those red dots, those are not game companies. Some of them aren't even tech companies. So in the end, if you just go by flat count, you're going to end up with more, even if not more, non-game companies than you work with game companies. Does that make you less of a game designer? No, of course not. Those red dots are just what you will do to keep food on the table while you continue to move towards your next game job. And you know what's not shown on this graph? What's not shown are all the things you will do while you're working at those red dots. All of these things will keep growing your skill and keeping you active in the game industry. And these are just a few of the things that you're going to do. Everything you do, everywhere you go, everyone you interact with feeds game design. And you need to keep looking at the world through that lens. So I guess what I'm saying is, Sheri, you are always going to be a game designer. And everything you do will feed to that. And those red dots, those are just speed bumps. Wait, you noticed that last dot, didn't you? It's not on the line, but it isn't red. It isn't really dark green either. That's where you're going to end your career. In a job that isn't exactly in games. It's kind of more games adjacent. And I know that doesn't make sense right now. You think you're going to make games forever. But I promise you're going to love it. Now we're going to talk about a real hard one. And that is, not everybody will be your friend. And there are some who will be actual enemies who really want to see you fail. And I know this is painful for you. You want everyone to like you. And you work really hard at it. You want everyone to get along. And I know the idea of having an actual enemy is going to keep you up at night and actually cause you physical pain. But you're going to learn to deal with it. And it comes in several different varieties. Some will be pretty straightforward. They're going to hate your book. They're going to mock your position on women games. At one point, someone will be handing out flyers protesting your presence on a panel at a conference. Sometimes it'll be on a project when you have a disagreement with the rest of the design team. And that's when they'll start having design meetings and not telling you where they are. Sometimes it'll be people for just whatever random reason just decide they don't get along with you. These are issues that can happen to just about anybody. And I'm pleased to say, for the most part, you're going to figure out diplomatic ways to handle these situations. And you're going to be fine. There will be some that are more painful. There will be a couple of cases where someone is hired in over the top of you. Remember when I talked about your boss leaving? Yeah, there are people that will be hired in over the top of you with explicit instructions to get Sheri to quit. And it will be done for business reasons. Perhaps the project is over budget and they need to cut salaries. So they choose you. Or perhaps they've got somebody from a former project that they want to bring on and put in your place. And they choose you again. But in all cases, it's not supposed to be personal, but it really feels personal. And the personal attacks will be vicious, and they will hurt. The good news is, when these events do happen, they're not going to be a surprise. You've already seen the handwriting on the wall. What I need you to do, Sheri, is I need you to realize that these are part of that handwriting on the wall, and then to make a good decision. Then there are those who decide they dislike you for reasons you absolutely will never figure out. This will go for them simply not speaking to you, to actually attempting to extort the companies to keep them from hiring you. But I can promise you, their enmity against you will not stop you in any way. It will not prevent you from moving your career forward. You are still and always will be a game designer. Number 5. So not only will not everyone be your friend, but you should not try to be personal friends with the people you manage. This will be particularly difficult when you find yourself in a position where you go from being a team member to being that team's boss. Forbes magazine talks about it this way. Friendship is a two-way street with everybody being of equal power. However, when you're in a managerial relationship, there is a power imbalance between you and your direct reports, as it should be. After all, you do control their income and their very living. But think about it this way. If on a weekend you sent a text to a friend, just something silly or text to a friend, they may or may not respond. If on a weekend you sent a text to a direct report, even if it's just some silly little thing, they're going to feel required to respond to you because you're their boss. And then it's work, and it's not a friendship. And I know, you tend to really like the people on your teams. You want them to succeed. You want to trust them. You want to give them ownership over what they're doing and reward them when they do it well. And that's fine. That's what makes a good manager. I'm just saying you're going to have to learn to do this from a position of a mentor rather than a personal friend. Like I said, this is one of those things you're going to struggle with through your entire career. Advice number 6. Never, ever take a step down in title. Never. This is one simple lesson that, oh my gosh, Sheri, I sure hope you can learn this because it's going to bite you right in the butt several times in your future. Please don't take a step down in title. And I know there's tons of articles out there and they say the exact opposite. They say if it's a higher salary or a greater project, who cares what your title is? Well, I'm going to tell you who cares what your title is, and that's the next set of people that are looking at your resume to hire you. When somebody looks at your resume and wants to hire you, you want them to think, wow, look at this great skill set. Look at this. Look at how this person fills the need that we have. The last thing you want them thinking is, why did she take a step back? Man, she must have really failed at that previous job. And I believe this is particularly true for women in the game industry. Or I'm going to go out on a limb and say women in any particularly male-dominated industry. It's hard enough for us to break through that glass ceiling the first time. If you slip under it, I assure you that ceiling becomes even harder to break the second time. So please, don't take a step down in title, no matter how good the salary, no matter how juicy the license, for your own future. Please don't do it. Finally, this is my final advice to you. Look, listen, and learn. You're at the beginning not only of your career, but at the birth of a whole new industry. You and your teams will be paving the way for all the developers who come after you. This is really exciting. But it also means you have no veterans to learn from. Instead, your teammates, friends, coworkers, and frankly, your life around you become your mentors. And you need to learn to look and listen to everything. Dungeons and Dragons and tabletop role-playing games. That's going to teach you game pacing, reward structures, and player attention spans. Your next D&D group, which, by the way, is still going 30 years later, will teach you how to deal with edge case-loving, rules-lawyering, number-munching players and keep them engaged and involved in your game. The defense industry will teach you that any topic, no matter how dry or technical, can be made into a compelling and fun game. And they really don't like funny hair colors on their developers. Gordon Walton is going to teach you how to make a real simulation into a fun game, and also about meeting discipline. Jen McLean, probably one of the most efficient, effective female executives out there. You absolutely are going to learn by watching how she works. Jesse Schell. This man is a walking encyclopedia of puzzle and arcade games. You will learn so much from him. Also, he's one of the best people at client relationships you're ever going to meet. Brenda Romero. She's going to teach you that to learn something, you should teach it, and how important teaching is in learning game design. Sam Lewis. He will define for you what a great systems designer actually looks like and how you have to kind of keep an eye on them or they spin off into complexity. Finally, every student, conference attendee, audience member that you encounter, they're going to challenge you at every turn, and they're going to teach you that you don't know all the answers and how that's okay as long as you keep listening and learning. So here you are. You're about to take a step into the career that's going to change your life. It will challenge you intellectually, creatively, and personally at every single turn. Anyway, I don't want to keep you any longer. Bill Armentrout, your new office mate, he's waiting. And you don't want to be late for your very first day. So go ahead. Go through that door. Don't worry. I'll see you in 33 years.
So how about Sheri? This is the subject she likes talking about the least herself. She can talk about lots of other,
many other things.
Many others.
Talking about myself.
I think you turn it on. Oh, it is on?
It's green. I just wasn't talking directly into it. I was muttering with a microphone.
All right. Who's got questions for Sheri?
Any questions?
I'll come
and
around.
I'll talk about anything else too. You want to talk about gender in games or design or anything? Happy to talk about all of it.
What was the biggest and most impactful experience towards you actually trusting your gut and trusting that you were seeing the writing on the walls throughout your career?
It took my health deteriorating. Don't let it get that far, y'all. Don't do it. It took my health starting to deteriorate. And it took most of my career before I finally figured out that, changing a company is really difficult to impossible if you're only one person or if you're only two or three people. It's really hard. I think we're starting to see some movement in the direction of unionization where we'll start to see some pressure being put on these companies. But when you're one, and I continue to try to beard that lion in the den, I would take it on. And I always assumed that, this is a very smart industry. As I said, I've never worked in an industry with such just brilliant people. So I assumed they're smart and they'll figure this out. So I would this is the way, we need to treat women and, as a viable audience. Why aren't we talking about this? And I assumed they were smart and they'd figure it out. And it didn't quite work that way. But yeah, so learn quicker. Learn from me. Don't let it get that far.
Just to underline that point, a lot of the stuff that you told your younger self, this is stuff that you didn't realize at the time.
Absolutely. No, that's why I wish I could go back and tell myself that if I see the handwriting and if I feel it in my gut, yeah, it's right. And because every time it would have been right.
Right. Any other questions here? I'll be taking some questions from YouTube in just a second.
I'd love to hear more about you starting the group at IDGA and the other professional association.
You would hear about that? Okay, so that's kind of a long story. Let's see if I can shorten it. We started with the Women in Games with the IGDA. That actually started as a committee when the IGDA had committees that handled different things. And so I went to them and I said, we need a committee to talk about women in games and to support both women in the game industry who want to be in the industry and also women as an audience that needs to be treated with some respect in our industry. Because remember, this is back in the very early 90s, late 80s. The common wisdom of the industry at that time was that women do not and will not play games. It was as if we were talking about, we're going to make games for podiums. That was literally the attitude. It was like, you want to make games for furniture? They didn't understand. So I said we needed this committee. And I said, okay. And then about maybe a year after we put the committee together, they came to me and they said, we're not going to make them committees anymore. We're going to break into this new structure where it's special interest group. And what we're going to do is we're going to take the women and all other minorities, and we're going to build a diversity special interest group. And I said, no, you're not. Because the problem is, while each of the minority groups has things in common, we also have our own different needs and desires and wants and things that apply to us. So when you put all the minority groups into one group, it actually diffuses the power and diffuses the voice. And what I've always done is want to amplify these voices to make sure that we're all heard and that everybody has an equal place at the table. And so I said, you're not going to do that. And they said, yes, we are. I said, no, you're not. And they went ahead and tried to do it that way. And I said, okay, if you're going to do that, then I'm going to break off and form another organization. We're going to call it Women in Games International, because I feel like we need our voice. Because one of the things that I found back at that time is that we would have, this company would have 2 women and that company over there would have 3 women and this one had 1. And so when you're one voice or 2 voices in a company of 200, you lose your voice. There's no voice there for you. You have no power at all. And you can get laughed at and trivialized, and they start holding game design meetings and not telling you where they are. And so I needed a way to bring these voices together. So that's when I founded Women in Games International. Well, the IGDA came back to me and said, we don't like what you're doing because we're afraid that's going to take money away and power away from the IGDA. I said, okay, it's not going to. I promise. We will work with your SIG if you give us a Women in Games SIG and give each of the minorities their own SIG. And they said, okay, we'll do that. And so that's the way that came to be. So for about 10 or 12 years, I ran both the organizations, both the SIG and the Women in Games International. So that's how that all came to be.
Awesome. Thank you.
So, as I said, big, long story.
Hello.
Hi.
I'm not sure how appropriate it is to ask about specifics, but I'm just curious from your perspective, when or what specifically do you feel like was a big win for women in games? Or like, was there a game in particular or just an event that occurred that you were like, yes, we are moving in the right direction?
There was a lot of little things. I don't think that there was one big watershed moment because we still haven't had it. We're still dealing with it. We still deal with it. When we have people that come out and say it's too much trouble to animate female figures. That's why we don't have them in our game. And that wasn't that long ago, so we're still dealing with it. But it's been a bunch of little bitty things. It's been when I put on the very first Women in Games conference here at Austin in conjunction with the Austin Game Conference. And we had 165 women show up. I thought we might get 40. We got 160. I was blown away. That was amazing. So that's where we said, okay, I think we've got enough to put together a committee for the IGDA, because we had 168 of us here. And so it's been lots of little steps along the way. Has it been as fast as I would like? Absolutely not. If you'd have told me 20-some years ago when I was putting this all together that 33 years later we still would not have 50% women in the game industry. In fact, we're still running about 30% in the industry, 30, and that's counting everything, not just development. I would have said, no, we're going to be to 50. We're not. We still have a ways to go. But I will say we have come a long way, and there's a lot of progress that has been made.
Cool. Thank you.
Sure. Hey. Yeah, tell me your names. Well, y'all would ask me questions. Tell me your names.
My name's Angela.
Hi, Angela.
What advice do you give to people who worry about age as a factor of getting into the industry? I know a lot of people are kind of scared to get into games because they think that they're too old for it.
So I had I hired an intern when I was with Schell Games. I was their director of design, and so one of the things I did was hire interns. And one of the interns I brought on was a 35-year-old woman. Her name is Heidi McDonald. You may have heard of her now. She's now one of the leading voices in like romance and game design. So I think the biggest hit they're going to take if you're older and coming into the game industry is going to be salary. Bluntly, this is still a glamour industry. We still have more people that want in than we have jobs available, which means we don't get paid very well. We're on par with like the film industry and television and that sort of things for our pay scales. So I tell them they've got to be willing to accept a much lower salary than they might get out in the real world. But to make sure, and then we were just talking about that, Edgar and I was just talking about this, make sure when you're presenting yourself to the game company that you are presenting your skill sets as something that is applicable to the job that you're doing and will solve the problem or the pain point that they have, the position that they're looking to fill. One of the problems we have in the game industry is not looking at skill sets. We look at how many titles have you got here? But in your cover letter and in your resume, if you present your skills as something that fills the requirements and how you can help them, that is one of the best ways to do it. Because you're bringing an immense set of skills as a person who's been in other industries. You bring skill sets with you that they need to find value, and you need to bring that up. So.
Hi, I'm Dustin.
Dustin.
So what was that lighter green dot?
That's the University of Texas. That's where I'll be teaching.
You did answer that. Okay.
Yeah, I'll be teaching. I'm teaching in the Arts and Entertainment Technology program that Michael Baker's running over there. I'm starting in October. I'll be teaching a 2-week portion of their foundations class. I'm teaching that on game design. So, yeah, I'm very excited. And really, it makes me very happy to think about.
Thank you.
One question from a guy named Vern. Yeah. Actually, it's her brother, Vern
That's
Graner.
my brother.
Yeah.
Vern, no.
He's watching on YouTube. I have a question for Sheri. Is there any specific gaming company / game you think is, quote, doing it right, end quote, in regarding gender inclusive design?
I get that question a whole lot. Honestly, I have
Even from your brother.
Yeah, even from my brother. Thanks, Vern. Hey, I want everybody to do me a favor. I want everybody to say at the same time. I want you all to say, hi, Vern. Okay? 1, 2, 3.
Hi, Vern.
Yes. So anyway, actually, we're starting to see, I don't know that there's one I would say this is exactly it, because I can usually say you guys can always do better. But I think in some of our games, some of the online free-to-play stuff, League of Legends, that kind of stuff, we're starting to see female characters that are not, they don't have disadvantages for being female. And that's a big deal. They're not weaker. They're not, less dexterity, less strength, they actually are on a par with their male, and they play important roles, not just the healer role. So I think that's some of the steps we're starting to see. So instead of specific titles, I think that's the movement I'm seeing, is it's more in the role of the female characters being equal to the male characters, which we didn't see usually. The female, you're the healer.
Sometimes they have roles that are not exactly the same that male will do, like in League. Most of the guys are not going to form K-pop groups.
Sure, right.
But that's something the girls will do. But that's okay.
That's okay. That's perfectly fine.
Any other questions here? This side.
Hi, I'm Raymond. I was
Raymond.
wondering is there any ways that you wish companies might have helped you transition whenever you have gotten without work?
So is there any way I feel companies should have helped when we were transitioning to out of work, you're saying?
Right, like
has
if
there
you
been a way
lost.
to ease us out the door?
Yes.
Yeah, that sure would have been nice. Actually, the best experience I had with that was in one of those red dot jobs when I went to work for Motorola, working on a corporate website. And they laid off they laid off 400 or 500 people all at one hit. And they actually had a set of classes that we went through afterwards that they gave us that taught us how to write a resume, how to network, how to approach our job hunt. And that was more helpful to me than anything I've ever gotten from any game company. Most of the times with the game companies, though, in the case of a layoff situation, they're hurting. Something bad has happened. They don't really want to lay people off. They don't want to shut projects down. They put a lot of money and a lot of time into that. They really don't want to. So when they do, they're hurting. And that's all they can think about. They're trying to keep themselves afloat, and the idea of trying to help people out the door is never going to be on their priority list.
I mean, then as now, it's true now as it is 30 years ago, that most game companies do not survive their first ship,
Right.
if they ship at all.
Exactly.
But the whole business and the enterprise is based around bringing people in to get the project done. And hopefully you have enough cash flow to do payroll and all the other good stuff, keep the lights on and internet.
Right. And some of the bigger companies, I think, could do, like EA and things have had to shut down teams and things. And I would like to see them pick up and do something like what Motorola did for us to kind of help out.
Yeah, they might actually be able to do it, and also the bigger companies that have multiple projects
Exactly.
will shunt people around, even though you might have
Sometimes, yeah.
shipped Star Wars: The Old Republic and like, well, we don't have room for you anymore, but would you like to make a golf game?
Yeah.
That's happened before. Any other questions for Sheri? Come around to Tyson.
Hi, Sheri. I'm Tyson.
Hi, Tyson.
So you mentioned in your speech that there were some people that were like actively opposing you or actively opposing women in games, but I'm sure a lot of the inequality exists more because of ignorance. And I don't know. I'm just assuming that. So
I wish it were.
Oh, really? Okay.
No,
well, I guess I wanted to ask, what are the mindsets that you see most pervasive?
So we have an industry that has built homogeneous teams. Our HR processes and our hiring processes could really stand to be improved. Where what we do is we look at the resumes, we pick, we do phone interviews, we pick 2 or 3 that we like, and we bring those 2 or 3 people in, and we send them through the entire team, where they have to talk to everybody. And the only instruction the team gets is, tell us if you like this person. Tell us if you think they're a fit. Well, you know what? That means they're going to look for people just like them, and I don't look like them. I don't look like them. I don't talk like them. I don't dress like them. I don't smell like them. I am not them. I bring in a whole different set of skills to that. But unfortunately, then it becomes, no, I'm only going to hire the people just like me. We still see an awful lot of that going around. I had it at EA where we were trying to hire somebody and they had to talk to everybody on the team. That's a colossal waste of time for the team. And then we end up with, you only want to hire people just like you. So we need to educate our people when they're interviewing better. We need to educate our HR people better. We need to look at our hiring processes. That's a big step. And then when you get a team that's all young, white, straight, able-bodied males, then you get that this is us against everybody else, and you get that. It becomes harder and harder to crack into that with somebody who is not that. And that still is predominantly what our industry is. Now, I will say we are seeing a lot of good things happen. We're seeing, and this is a real turnaround for me. So years and years ago, when I started at Origin, one of the things was we did not hire college graduates. Okay? Because we said, if you've been in school for 4 years, you've wasted your time. You could have spent that 4 years making games. We're not interested. There were no college graduates. Today, the industry is 87% college graduates. That's huge, because what that does is our colleges look different. Our colleges look more like the room I'm seeing here. Just the fact this room looks different is bringing that forward into our interview processes, where people sit down and look at this room full of, all white guys, all straights, cishet, able-bodied white guys, and go, this doesn't look right because this isn't what I'm used to seeing. And that's helping. So we are moving in the right direction, but we still have that initial barrier that we've got to crack to get in.
I'm Gary. Hi, Sheri.
Hi, Gary.
Question for you about business contracts. Do you think they vary in a significant manner based on a couple of factors? Indie versus large corporation studios, and private versus publicly traded companies?
You're talking about the business social contracts?
Yes.
The way? Yes and no. I think at their heart, they all have business continuity and moving the business forward at their heart. I think that they have individuals as a part of that process in as far as what they bring to the business and as far as what they have to do legally as far as OSHA and things like that. So I think it's just a matter of how that scales. I think even in the indies that the whole emphasis on making it is even stronger, because the indies are all on a shoestring, and we talked about not making your first ship. There's your big problem. Whereas the big companies have stockholders that they have to answer to and boards that they have to answer to. So it's just kind of a magnitude issue, but I think at their heart, they're still pretty much the same.
When you think about how many years people went to UT Austin wanting to make game development, and they only started a game program in the design school 4 years ago.
Before, yeah.
Yeah.
Hey, Sheri. I'm James.
Hi, James.
I was wondering if there are any recent examples of games or system design that you've seen that have been really inspiring. Like, you think, wow, after this many years, people are still coming up with really cool new ideas. Could be a recent release, or
does it have to be stuff I liked?
No, something interesting that's thought provoking.
I think I actually, and this pains me to say it because I'm not a huge free to play person, but I actually think some of the things we're doing in free to play is turning that around and making it a really viable and fun model that we're still able to, that we're going to be able to produce really cool content for. So that's where I would look, and it pains my heart to say it because my heart is in MMOs and I love to develop MMOs, and I am even worse than that, and I like the subscription model because I like the ability to build out the long stories. You don't get that ability in a free-to-play model. But I think we're moving better in that direction, and I'm starting to see some things that give real value for the play. And I think that's a part of the developers. I think we're seeing developers get smarter about that. Some of it is because we've got people who've been playing free-to-play now are coming in as developers, which we hadn't had before, and they're starting to build some really smart models for it where it makes sense.
Yeah, I don't know if you saw, but kind of a alignment of your interests, Julia Narden from Bungie. She was the seasonal narrative lead. Now she's like Destiny IP lead. So it's interesting seeing those things shake up.
Yeah.
Hi, Sheri. I'm Gunnar.
You are
Gunnar.
Yeah. Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you. For more of a silly change of tone, as a game master, what has been one of your favorite moments or encounters from your
I get to tell
games?
my story. Yay. So this is a real important moment because this was the moment that told me what I really wanted to do, that I was going in the right direction. So I played and run Dungeons and Dragons since early college. I'm a little too old to have been like in high school when it came out, so I was a little older than that. But in college, now remember, actually you guys don't know, I am from McAllen, Texas. How many here know where McAllen is? Yes. Hey! Pace? Yeah. Hannah? Cowboys? McAllen, Bulldogs, hey. But anyway, so so I'm from McAllen, which is a very small town, and when I played Dungeons and Dragons down there, there were no comic stores, there were no bookstores, there were no people that know to play. So I actually took an ad out in the college I was at, Pan American, which is now UT Rio Grande Valley. I took an ad out in the school newspaper asking for people to teach me to play Dungeons and Dragons, right? Because I couldn't find anybody. So I started playing Dungeons and Dragons. So I ran a group, and then we moved to Austin, and it was heartbreaking for me because I lost my game group. So finally got a new game group together. So we were playing, and this is just before I started in the industry. And we were playing, and I built this big, long campaign based around the Cat Lord character. And this Cat Lord character had kidnapped one of their NPC hirelings for the group. And they'd spent weeks chasing through all kinds of dungeons and stuff trying to rescue their friend. And we come to the last night, and they finally tracked down their friend, and they were the characters were all standing on a mezzanine looking down into like a gladiatorial pit that had a maze in it. And their friend was down there being chased by different monsters and creatures and was trying to get away. And the monsters were getting closer, and the character was running and screaming and calling up to them for help. And they had to figure out how to get down. That was the puzzle, how to get down in there to rescue their friend. And they were having trouble with it. And and it was just getting frantic. And one of the characters finally smacks the table, and he pushes his chair back, and he says, "I can't watch this anymore." And he got up and walked out. I can't watch this anymore. Now, we were sitting in my little apartment, which was this grubby little apartment with a little table stuffed into the tiny little kitchen with pizza boxes and Mountain Dew bottles. But he wasn't there. He was in that dungeon. He was watching his friend be tortured, and he was frustrated that he wasn't figuring out. One thing, obviously, as a GM, I needed to figure out how to get him down there a little faster. But second off, I realized that for that moment, he wasn't there. And that moment, I knew this is what I wanted to do. I wanted to give people that opportunity to move out of my grubby little kitchen and to be a hero of a story. And that's why I started to make games. And that's why I still am interested in making games. And that's what I'm going to teach. I want to teach that passion and teach people how to make that happen for people. That's the moment.
So, a question online from Victoria Rice asks, I know you mentioned that you had to approach your relationships as a leader from a mentorship perspective,
Yes.
but what do you believe is another important leadership lesson you have come to learn? Besides mentorship, what else do you need to do well as a leader besides mentor?
You have to trust your employees. You have to trust the people you hire. And that sounds easy and you think everybody does it, but they don't. You must trust them. So you must, when I assign you a project or a thing to do or a part of a project, I have to trust that you're going to make the right decisions when you're doing that work for that project. And I have to be hands off enough to let that happen, to let that person take ownership and to trust that they're going to do the right thing. And bluntly, if I can't trust them, I hired the wrong people. Because I got to hire people that I trust to do this. But trust is the hardest thing for a manager to learn to do and to turn loose of enough to let that person do their work and to let them fail. And they might fail. And then we got to clean up. And then that, as the manager, is my job to help them clean up that mess or to clean it up completely. But I have to trust them. And I see that as a failure of my part. Again, I either gave them too much for what they could do, or I hired somebody I couldn't trust. And that's the hardest thing to do. And that is also the other big management lesson.
Victoria has another good question, but John's had his hand up. So.
Hi, John here.
Hi, John.
Sheri. So speaking of failures, right? There have been a few pretty big industry blunders as of late. Games come out in terrible, broken states or, just rushed development cycles, those poor developers. But when that sort of thing happens, what do you feel are the necessary steps that a company should take to remediate that sort of thing rather than just saving face like they always do?
That's an interesting question because that's never a place I've been. I've never been in a position of the person who would be making those decisions. I can only tell you what I would hope they would do. I would hope that the biggest thing they would do is take it as a learning lesson and understand better how to schedule and manage time and to manage. And this sounds cliche. Everybody's heard this, but to manage the feature creep. But it also comes from planning in the beginning and understanding in the beginning what your team is capable of and what you actually can do. That's what I would hope would happen first, is that they'd be willing to learn from it. And oftentimes they don't. They just go right back and do the same mistake again. And sometimes they even double down on it because now we're going to try to get out faster and make up for that. Cutting the cord as quick as they can and don't let the poor title languish out there and die. It's really hard too. Let's get it back and let's fix what we're going to fix it and learn our lessons.
Thank you.
A lot on the idea of failure as a teaching method. Some little green Muppet said that was a great way to do it. Victoria Rice has another question. I know she's into Star Wars. I can say things like that. Victoria also says, how do you approach communication and managing professional relationships, being a colleague and or leader as a woman in tech?
How do I manage communication as a leader, colleague, as well as just a woman in tech? Basically, the way I manage communication is constant. Silence is the last thing you ever want from your boss. The other thing is I try to make it very clear to my teams that just because I showed up in their office doesn't mean something's wrong. I'm absolutely a walk-around manager. If I ever find myself sitting still at my desk with nothing to do, that means I get up and walk the team. So communication, that's what I said in the talk, is that it's particularly if your company or your project is going through major changes, but anytime, the best way to do it is open, constant communication. My team, I always want my team to know they can come to me if something's wrong, and I'm not going to explode at them. Don't kill the messenger. Let's figure out what it is. Let's solve this problem together, and better if I could help them figure out a way to solve the problem. So yeah, it's constant. Communication is constant and open and all the time.
How often do you see people in positions of leadership who don't know or don't respect communication?
All the time.
Yeah. Why do you think that is?
I have often thought that sometimes they don't want to hear bad news. But I want to hear bad news because I'd rather hear that bad news today than when it's a minor bad problem than when it's a horrible bad problem. Please, please, please tell me now. But I think they don't want to hear bad news. I also think maybe sometimes they're busy with other things. Sometimes they're overtasked with issues going on above them. But yeah, I would just say, I would encourage anybody, if you ever find yourself in a management position, talk to everybody every day, all the time. At least twice a day, I wander in my team's offices.
I do have one other question on this, but and actually Victoria gives good feedback. Amazing trust and fostering accountability should definitely be at the heart of these projects. Thank you. Any other questions for Sheri? Comrade? Oh.
Hi, Sheri. I'm Walter. My question for you is, what is one of your favorite game narratives? And do you think that narrative is just a great narrative, or did it like help push the craft forward?
Okay, so I've got two answers. The first one is really, for those of you, guys, most of you don't know me so well, but for the first one, my obvious answer is going to be Star Wars. I am a huge Star Wars fan. I'm a member of the 501st. So, yeah. So, yeah, Star Wars all the way. So I would say that. If I were going to dig back and say one of the best narratives, and this is going to be before most of y'all's time, there was a game called Underworld. It was an Origin Looking Glass game. That one, I thought, really kind of joined that 2.5D to narrative and caught my attention and kept me in the story while still being a 2.5D shooter. So that's going way back, but that's because I thought that was a really nice stepping us forward into building good narratives in action games.
Thank you for the homework.
If you can find something it'll still run on. Yeah, the first. This is Ultimate Underworld, Stygian Abyss.
Hey, I'm Nick.
You are. Tell me your name again.
Nick.
Nick.
When you're in between your game dev jobs and on a red dot job, what strategies do you have, or what do you do to not get stuck in the red dot job, get back to game dev?
Network. So networking is I'm going to tell you real truthful. Networking is a skill you can learn. And I'll tell you right now because I never believed I could do it. I would ask people, how do you network? And they'd say, just go to the parties. So I'd go to the parties and I'd end up standing in the corner with a watered down drink going, I'm networking. No, don't do that. There are actual steps you can take. You can actually network. If you go up to my website, SheriGranerRay.com, there's a set of articles there called Networking 101 and the Networking 102. Walk through those. It's actually step by step how you do it. And I actually had to teach myself. The second part of that is not only do you network, you must farm that network. You have to think of this as a crop, because what you're doing right now, talking to me tonight, that's networking. But that's the first step. There are steps you have to take to continue to farm and grow that network, because it's one thing for you to talk to me tonight and I'll go, John, yeah, okay. 3 days from now, he could walk up to me and I'd, hi, because there's a lot of people here. And there's ways you can keep your name and your face at the top of my list without being intrusive and without being obnoxious. And that's what you want to do, because the next time I'm like, I really could use a writer. What was that guy I met at that night? Let's see, and I go back in, and if you follow the steps I lay out there, you actually can do that. And like I said, it's hard because, as you may have gathered from my talk, for a good portion of my career, I wasn't sure I belonged here. First off, I was female and everybody around me was not, so I didn't look like anybody. And so I wasn't real sure I was actually a game designer, So it was hard for me. But network, and stay involved. Volunteer. That's the other thing you do. You volunteer. You tell John, next time you do this, I'm going to come early and help you set up chairs. I'm going to help handing out name tags. Best job ever. Because then you get to put names with faces. Very important. So yeah, volunteer. That's what you do when you're doing your red job. You really think of your red job as this is just putting the food on the table. and keeping me so I have time and money and energy to do my other things, which is volunteer and network and go to conferences and work on my own game. That's what you need to do.
Thank you.
You can help me put the chairs away because they got to go back.
Seriously?
On the stacks over here.
That's what you need to do.
I'll come back over to it. Well, I have one, but it's a guy named calls himself Dr. Cat.
Hi, Dr. Cat.
I think you sort of asked this question, but it's different enough. You mentioned you're now in a quote game adjacent end quote role, and that you're happy with it. What sort of work are you doing now?
Yes, I answered that. I'm actually going to be teaching game design at the University of Texas, and I am if you'd have told 33 years ago, if you'd have told Sheri that 33, that girl about to walk in there, she'd have just been horrified at that idea.
Yeah,
I can't tell you how much I'm looking forward to it. I'm really excited about it.
And that's all you're going to do? I mean, it seems like people are asking you to do other stuff, but maybe you don't want to do it.
Okay, I'm also working on my PhD, so.
There you go. Yeah.
I'm working on my PhD specifically on inclusivity and diversity in the game industry and in tech in general.
Isn't there like a writing job you're doing related to that PhD?
That is, well, it is. It's the second edition of my book.
Yeah.
The Gender Inclusive Game Design is going to become Inclusive Game Design. It's going to be the second edition, and it's also serving as my dissertation. So.
The actual book that says why gender matters in game development. Yes.
I tell you a little funny story about that. When I wrote that book, I really thought, okay, this is the first book. Now people will write more books and more work, and this will just be.
Did anyone else write a book?
No. Well, not Henry Jenkins. He wrote his book, and there's been a number of academic papers. But yeah, so I was kind of like, really? Am I still the only one standing up here saying this? Yeah.
Hi, I'm AJ.
Hi, AJ.
If I remember correctly, John and I were talking about you behind your back. Good things, I promise. I believe you have been to the Star Cruises?
Yes.
Star Tour?
In May.
Galactic Star Cruiser.
In May,
right.
Yes.
Can you give me a critique of the Star Cruiser as a game developer rather than a Star Wars fan?
Yes. It's very interesting. There have been a couple of articles written about it, and they actually did consult with many, many LARP designers, and you can tell. And I don't want to give too much away because it would be giving spoilers, and I really hope y'all get a chance to go do it, if nothing else for professional research, but also because, oh my God, is it fun? So it is a live action role play, and you are involved from the minute you walk through the door. They tie you in. Yes, it's expensive. Every dollar is on the stage. You see it all. They could use some work. There are some choke points in some places where people essentially camp the spawn. Oh, the Star Cruiser. Does everybody who here has heard about the Disney Star Cruiser? Okay, so I've got a few people that haven't. Disney has a hotel they've put in at Disney World that people sign up, and it's a 3-day, 2-night, fully immersive Star Wars experience. The hotel is actually called a ship. It is built like a cruise ship. If you've ever been on a cruise ship, it looks like a cruise ship from the minute you walk in. From the minute you walk through the door, you are fully immersed in this world. Everybody is dressed in costume. Everybody talks to you in character. Every crew member has a role. The action and the stories are people that are walking amongst you all the time. You can talk to them directly. They expect you to, and they want you to. So it is a fully immersive Star Wars experience. Probably one of the most fun vacations I've had in years and years. I didn't ever want to leave. And yes, they do allow uniforms for anybody's 501st. I was allowed to be, which is not allowed in the park. You can't cover your face, and you can't wear uniforms that anybody might think you're a crew member. But they don't on the actual Star Cruiser, so I was in uniform, and it was really fun. It was just stupid amounts of fun.
All right, we're coming down to the last 20 minutes of this. Here's another YouTube question from Michael Esquivel. John mentioned in the previous talk that the industry hasn't yet learned how to create talent. Taking my word for it. Please don't do that. Listen to other people. But
John said,
what are you going to do differently to make sure this problem is finally solved? Sheri solved this problem for us.
Oh, sure, no problem. Come take classes from me.
Yeah.
I think we have to. There's a couple of things that have to happen, and this is if you have ever heard me when I talk, I do a lot of speaking to students, and I have in the past. And here's the super secret about games and game design. You're never going to make your dream job, so get over it right now. Okay, so here's how it's going to work. You're going to go to school. You're going to work your butt off in school. You're going to have your senior capstone project. It's going to be nights and days and horrible time. And then you're going to come out of there and you're going to get probably some sort of an internship or a QA job, and you're going to be playing the same broken game 6 days a week, and it's still broken, and people yell at you when you tell them it's still broken. And then you're going to go through that, and then finally the interview is going to come up, and you're going to get an interview for that job to be a designer, and they're going to hire you. And you're going to be getting a job designing Kim Kardashian's Hollywood game.
Yeah.
No, not Kim Kardashian. Kim Kardashian knockoff game.
Yeah.
And
Chloe.
that's what you're going to be. Yeah. And so if you can't look at Kim Kardashian and make a knockoff of it, if you can't look at that game and go, okay, this audience is 16 to 30-year-old women, probably. What can I do to give them the best experience they've ever had? That's the trick. That's my game. My game is, can I make you love this next game I'm making? Because you don't like the same games I do. There's just no way, right? So my game that I play is, can I make the best game those 16 to 35-year-old women that love Kim Kardashian have ever seen? And that's what I intend, and that's what I hope I can teach, because that's how you bring the talent, the real talent, into the game industry. If they understand that our game is not making our favorite game. That's not going to happen. Our game is making the best game for the audience we've been told to make the game for. And if you can find your passion in that, then you'll be successful, and you'll be 33 years in the industry. And that's how we bring talent and keep good talent in the industry.
Justin Andrews thinks that it's funny that I said Chloe. Any other questions for Sheri? Okay.
So you say make the best game for the audience you've been told to make it for.
Absolutely.
What if all your execs are saying, make a game for the Fortnite kids? We need to make Fortnite 2, and
then you look at your
that.
audience, you try to see, you find out. This is always the trick question. And if you ever do a game jam and I'm your judge, this is the first question I'm going to ask you is, who's your audience? You need to find out who their audience is and get them to nail it down real clear. Because the trouble with a Fortnite 2 or an Asheron's Call 2 or an EverQuest 2 is you have to understand who you're making it for. Am I trying to make it for Fortnite players that I want them all to move over? Am I trying to make it for Fortnite players who left and I want to bring them back? Am I trying to make it for new people to bring them into Fortnite who didn't play original? That's a real hard question, and I'll tell you, that's a hard question sometimes to get the execs to answer. But get them to answer that question so you understand very clearly in your head who that audience is. And that's how you do it, and that's how you make a better game.
Cool. Thank you.
Yeah. Executives think they can talk game design, but not all of them. They're not all made alike.
Getting them, sometimes they know, but they all have a different idea.
There you go.
So getting them all to agree, that's hard.
Well, any other questions for Sheri? What about one more?
Hi, Sheri. My name's Jake.
Hi, Jake.
I came in kind of late, so I unfortunately missed a good chunk of your talk. But hopefully there's someone here that resonates with this question, and that is, what are your thoughts on generalizing your skill set versus specializing? Because as a student, I struggle with that, like regularly, like month to month, week to week, day to day.
When I started, as I said, there were writers, or there were programmers, there were artists. That was it. And then they figured out somebody had to write dialogue because programmers wrote crappy dialogue. So they brought writers. That's what I was hired in. But then they handed us all the quest design too. So we were all generalists. I'm a generalist to this day. I don't think that's the way it goes anymore. I think you need to find your passion in the industry and really work on doing it. I think the competition has gotten high enough now that I've often said, somebody with my experience trying to break into the game industry that I had 33 years ago, I would have been laughed out the door today. But I think you need to at least have a category. I want to do systems design. I want to do monetization design, economic design, narrative design. I think you have to have at least a piece of the pie cut out to what you want to do. Because I think if you're too diverse, then if you're a generalist, it's not going to be enough for the positions that they're wanting. Well, you get a little bit of that, but it's not enough to fill all the check boxes that they need for that particular person. So I think you need to find a nice niche or a nice piece of the pie of the area that you want and make that your calling.
Thank you.
I'll riff off of that one because I do know a lot of people who are wanting to have a job at a game company, which usually means a bigger game, and their objective is to make a game that they, within their own means, basically as a calling card. But then I sometimes hear that they run into trouble because they either worked on too small a team or just by themselves, and they don't really understand the team dynamic, so they're not giving a shot. So oftentimes it doesn't seem like that always is, well, we can't say that anything's foolproof as a method.
No, nothing is.
But it also seems like there's a lot of unfairness along the way that no one can anticipate.
There's always, and there's personal preference, and there's still biases and things when you go into interview. I mean, I had somebody, I guess this was about 5 years ago, I had somebody tell me, you've got all the qualifications that you want, you've got the experience that we've been looking for, but you know, what we've got here is a fraternity, and we just don't think you'd fit in. And that is a quote. It was about 5 years ago, 6 years ago. So yeah, so it still happens. So you still got biases, yeah. It's going to happen.
I always wondered I think I've heard you tell me that story, I was wondering, like, what kind of reaction, other than getting up and leaving, did he expect you to do?
Well, the funny thing is they were putting me in a cab to send me back to my hotel for the flight back home. Where they'd flown me in for an interview.
Oh, so they're just justifying what they're about to do.
At the end, this is what he said to me as he was literally closing the taxi door with me in the car.
Don't feel too bad. Just head on home now.
Yeah. It had already kind of been through the interview. I was kind of like, I think this is probably not going to work.
Okay. All right.
He had quite a bit to drink. A lot to drink. God himself. I was like, I'd never had an interview that part of the interview was bar hopping with him.
All right.
Because one of my rules is never drink on a job interview. Never drink on a job interview. That was a tough one.
Speaking of professionalism, it is now 10 minutes till 9 o'clock. How about one more hand for Sheri Graner Ray as our speaker this evening?
Thank y'all. Thank y'all for listening.